everyone who has taste, those are the people that I'm seeing explode with AI the most. I feel like the people that I've seen that really have excelled with it so far are the people who excelled without it and who had ideas, but they just were constrained on time and brainstorming and research and all these other things unrelated to the actual ability of creating products.
Welcome to the Hallway Track. I'm Chris Vinoy. This week I'm talking with John Nunemaker, a programmer who somehow runs 3 companies at once: Box Out Sports, Fireside, and Flipper, while maintaining open source projects like HTTParty and Flipper that half of the Ruby world installs without thinking twice about it. We get into why he gave up on Focus years ago and gets more done because of it, how feature flags quietly change the way you build software, and why AI hasn't made the hard part any easier. It's just made the easy part faster. The building was never the bottleneck. The taste was. If your team just got a lot more capable and you're realizing the constraint moved from writing code to knowing what's worth building, this one's for you. Howdy. Welcome in, folks. My guest today is John Nunemaker. I already know him, but could you introduce yourself to everybody else, like who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm John Nunemaker. In software, I just call myself a programmer, but wear a lot of different hats. I've got 2 different companies: Box Out Sports, which is like social media, graphics, and marketing, and all kinds of stuff that anyone who has events and needs to promote them, or people who needs to promote them. So, and then I also have Very Good Software, which is like Fireside and Flipper. So Fireside's a podcast host, and then that we bought maybe 2 years ago, and then Flipper is a dev tool, and I've got some more dev tools in the works too. So.
Well, in addition to that, you're also a pretty prolific, this is how I originally knew you, pretty prolific open source developer. I think when we first actually met, I'd already known your work for like 20 years now, because HTTParty and Flipper, which we'll talk more about later, are like almost initial installs into gem files of Ruby projects I work on, and always have been. So thank you for that very much. You've been a big influence on my career, believe it or not, just from those 2 things. That, and again, in the past, you also used to run an app called Gauges that did like web analytics and that sort of stuff. And I was a longtime customer of that as well back in the day. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Gauges is a really cool one because that was my hernia project. I had like 3 hernias in 1 year and surgeries and all that. And I was like not good enough to like do client work because that, takes some willpower, but I was good enough to like hack on something. So I built that. So, and every time I hear somebody has a warm spot in my heart for Gauges. So
that's good. And it is, sorry, this isn't on the agenda at all, but that is kind of the projects that come out of like when you're laid up for a little while, one way or the other, right? Or just like low energy and like I'll do something on the side and you don't expect it to do anything necessarily. Sometimes those end up being the things that we're most proud of in a lot of ways.
I actually think what would be my ideal way to work would be just that kind of stuff. And I think I would do better. I think I'd have a better career, more success, all that kind of stuff if I somehow figured out how to just like do whatever I felt like when I had no energy. Because usually that if you have the energy to do that, then imagine when you actually get your energy back, what you would do with it. So
well, that's why I have a business of 1 at this point. Like I don't have any employees or anything. If I have a low energy day, it's just like, well, I'll just answer some emails today. It'll be fine. Doesn't work for everybody and doesn't always work for me. But like when it does, it's nice.
But I actually have a business of more than 1 only because of the same reason. Because then if I have low energy one day, somebody else is still getting stuff done. So
that is the downside of running a business of 1. It's like if I have a bad day, there's nobody else there. But you are managing a lot. Like you just rattled off a whole bunch of stuff. You got 2 companies, multiple open source projects, even older companies that aren't there anymore. You also didn't mention, like in the past, you've worked at GitHub, for instance. You've worked at Notre Dame here locally inside of Indiana. Like how do you it's a large volume of stuff and it's all good stuff. So how do you manage all that?
I don't know. So I think like the easy answer for me that I've kind of come to is like 2 things. Like 1, the more you put on your plate and if you can come up with coping mechanisms for that stuff of like handling the fact that, there's just always a deluge of things to do and you just prioritize and whatever and do the most important thing and move on, or the most immediate thing that needs to be done, even if it's not important. So that's like 1 thing. I think I've just over time, I've gotten better. I didn't do a bunch of things at first. At first it was like, I just did my work at Notre Dame or at, smaller companies. And then sometimes I would do a side project or sometimes I would do an open source project on the side, And so I got used to that. And then it was like, I just kept adding more things because I just like I've been described sometimes by myself and others as like a little chihuahua. Like I just get really when I get excited about stuff, I just don't shut up and I go hard on it. So I think that's part of it, but simultaneously, like that's a lot of effort and everybody always tells you to focus. They always say focus, like that's how you do something big and great and all that kind of stuff. And I always felt like I was kind of honestly like broken for quite a while because I couldn't focus on one thing. Um, and then I think it just eventually I realized like I get more done because there's more things to do. Like a lot of times you get jammed on something or you have to process something in the background. And then if you only have one thing, you go to zero. Like there's nothing else. Or maybe you go to like a little, like half or quarter or something where you're just kind of checking email like we were talking about or like doing other things. But if you always have a very next most important thing on three different projects, if you get stuck on one, you just go to the other. And then when you get, inspiration, go back to the first. So I think in all, what I look at it is like, I don't push one thing forward as far or as fast, but I push lots of things forward on a pretty regular basis. I've got a lot of coping mechanisms and stuff in place for like how to handle the pressure when they all go bad at the same time, which occasionally happens.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So that's what's I think helped me a lot is just those two things. So like one, I feel like I get more done because I always have something I can switch to that's interesting. And two, I gave up on trying to focus maybe like 3 years ago because I was just like, you know what? That's just not me. I can't do I sold Speaker Deck to a friend and I mean, honestly, I kind of regret it. I'm like, I still help him on it now because I like working on it. Like I just do it on the side, and he pays me. And it's just because I thought like I needed fewer apps. And then it was like, no, I just like having a big variety. So yeah, there's no specific like thing I can point to. It's just like, they say that, the dumb quote is like pressure makes diamonds or whatever. Like the more you get used to like a certain amount of things and, I liken it to an ER doc, like compartmentalizing. Like I just compartmentalize each thing and even it can be completely on fire over here and I can just focus on this thing and that's okay. Like I just gotten better at doing that. So that's kind of how I manage with it.
Yeah, one of the things I've discovered is like speaking of like coping mechanisms, right? Like if I don't have something to do, my brain will come up with stuff to do, right?
Yes. Oh yeah, you stay busy.
It's like, and sometimes that stuff is not all that useful.
Yeah.
You seem to fill it with useful stuff, which is interesting, sort of productive coping mechanisms, probably better than mine.
It does kind of come from like a spot of brokenness though, I think, because like, I've done a lot of open source, but even the open source and stuff, I feel like inevitably a lot of that, the only point of it was to like, and I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, and so maybe it makes me a horrible person, but I'm like, the point of doing the open source, the point of all the blogging was like, I wanted to create a reputation so that eventually, because I just saw other people do that, they create a reputation, eventually they turn it into money. So it's like make reputation, question mark, question mark, question mark, and then like profit at the end.
Yeah.
So that was why I did it originally. And then, and then it was like, part of it was like not as enjoyable. And then, we can talk about it later, like, the valleys and the mountains of doing open source and free things and stuff. But yeah, overall, I think when I do something, I want to see the result, and the result's usually like someone gives me money for it, just because it like proves that it was, I don't know, that there was something interesting about it, that somebody else got interested, and I don't know. So that's where a lot of times it ties back to, and it feels dumb sometimes, but yeah. So that's the only reason why I focus on certain things instead of others.
Well, keep in mind, you're talking to someone who's doing a podcast for like no reason other than talk to cool people like you, and like maybe there's a reputation and money you had at some time. I don't know.
There will be, yeah. If you do it for long enough, I think. Obviously, you take it very serious and like you do a good job on it. So I feel like if you do that for long enough, it's just time,
Yeah, just time and effort always is. It's a shame stuff doesn't happen quicker. Anyway, so of all the stuff you're doing right now, is Box Out like the primary thing?
Yep. Yeah. So I joke that I have 7, 6, and 5-figure businesses. So Box Out's 7, Fireside 6, and then Flipper's 5, but pretty close to 6. So then I'll ruin that. But so it's the biggest, and I appropriately, split up my time based on kind of that. So
yeah, how big of a team do you have working on Box Out these days?
It varies a lot. We are, so like employees, I would say it's like the 4 owners, and then we probably have another 3 or 4 at least employees, maybe I'd have to think about it and count. Don't do public math, so I won't do that here. And then we generally have like another 4 to 6 contractors. So it varies, fluctuates at any given time in between 10, 15, 16 people. When we have our Christmas parties in like January, there's typically, 15 or 20 people plus extras. So
Yeah. And how long has that app been around?
It's old. I think we always call it seasons because everything with Box Out is sports because it's Box Out Sports to start. And so I think we're on, I want to say like season 13 or something like that. I joined it at about 2019, so about 6, 7 years ago. So about season 6 or something, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been around for quite a while. It's funny when people sometimes call it a startup because they don't know it. And it is, and having like 10 people seems small, so it must be a startup. And it's like, no, actually, like we even had a private equity guy that we were talking to at one point. He was like, you broke our frame for like companies because they saw us, ignored us, and went to like a competitor. They were trying to buy them, and then they went to the competitor. The competitor was like, no, like they're kind of delusional about amount. So they kind of dropped it because they're like, well, those are the only 2 people in the space, and the one seems too small because they only have like 1 or 2 people on LinkedIn. There's no way they can have enough revenue that they would be worth buying. And then we had randomly like put like a 1-pager out at one point in our time. And the private equity person like saw it and was like, I know who that is. And immediately reached out to us and they're like, how big are you? And so then we like, we told them and whatever. They're like, we totally changed the way we look at companies now on LinkedIn and other places because we realize we can't just assume they're small just because the presence is small. If they're focused on automation or other things, it's possible. So.
Yeah. What is sort of the trick to being able to, like you said, build sort of a company that's bigger than its team size, right? What were some of the key points along the way that allowed you to be able to do that and sort of break that frame?
I think it just comes back to laziness, honestly. I mean, because Steve and I in particular are both like we're programmers, developers, designers, whatever you want to call it, app people. And we've done it for a long time and we're just lazy. We just have no patience for needles and for painful and tiny little things. And so like everything that got painful, we would just automate it. So like on one side, I think it's laziness. And then on the other side, we have like Robbie and Robbie, it's sales and stuff like that. And he's the opposite of that. Like he's just like hard work, hours, grind, And so I think the two of those sides together of like, someone who wants to grind all the time, and then like other people who are like, well, what if we leveraged some of that so you weren't, working? So like we had problems with checks for like a while. Like schools want to write checks. And so then like non-payment and tracking non-payment started to become a big deal, like when I started. And so, thankfully we got in like the pay by check beta for Stripe, which now is coming to an end, but it helped a lot. And, we got stuff like that going and automated that. And then, we locked down people when they hadn't paid. And so then they started reaching out and then, we could keep track of it a little better. I remember one of the first things I did, I don't remember what it was, like $50,000 or $70,000. I like just shut off a bunch of people because they hadn't paid in like 2-3 years. And I did some reports and caught it. And I just wrote some stuff that was automatic. They would just be shut off if they hadn't paid. And like literally the first day, I think it was like 20 grand of people who just like, oh, we haven't paid. Okay. They didn't even know,
Yeah.
So it's just automate all the things, I think. And then, you also need to grind at times. Like and Steve and I we'll grind really hard when we're on something new, like some new product or feature or something like that. And then once it's out, it's like, okay, now let's relax a little bit and not go as hard and be lazy. So I think it's just kind of that juxtaposition, probably.
Yeah.
Good balance.
No, it's always good to have salespeople who want to grind, by the way. That's generally what you want to hire for. Like lazy salespeople you don't want.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also interesting that the app is old enough that like it's pre-AI and post-AI. Has AI-powered workflows changed how you work together or how Box Out works these days?
Yes. I would say the biggest change is amplification, So like number one, we get a lot more done. Like a lot more done. So we have shipped so much in the last 6 months. So I think that's probably the biggest change is amplification. The other change is doing things we would not have done before. So like things our customers were asking for, but we were like, you know what? We're in our niche. Doing what they're asking for is totally different and very difficult. So we're just going to tell them, sorry, we're built for speed. We're not built for customization. Like if you want to get your job done fast and you don't want to worry about the size of a font or a logo or things like that, use us. If you want to tweak things, then use somebody else. So now we're like, what if we did both? What if we actually just because it's not the blocker is not building this really complex, but recreating Photoshop in the browser, it's not hard anymore, So we're just like, okay, let's just do it. And so we're going to be releasing that pretty soon, like where, you can basically do like Figma, Photoshop style stuff in the browser to make box out templates and then on repeat connect them to data and ship that out really fast. So I think those are the two most obvious AI differences are amplification. So we're getting way more done. And then two, we're doing things that we said no to before because it seemed too hard and too daunting. And now we did them in like a month or two,
Yeah.
So
That's the interesting AI use cases lots of times I've looked at are like what things were out of reach before, right? Or you'd have to hire like an army of mechanical Turks or something, which is generally what I think of AI sometimes. And like what sort of stuff for that is now pulled down into reach. Like I was in a similar space where I was working in MarTech, like marketing technology, where we were doing account-based marketing sort of stuff, right? So you'd want to do like personalized advertising based on the account you're actually reaching. Right. And it's like, we can't really scale that across, back in the day, like 2,000 different companies or something. Right. Like it's going to be a pain in the butt. If I were still at that job today, like AI makes that really pretty easy or straightforward. Sorry. I coach people all the time never to say things are easy. You just say they're straightforward. We know how to do that. Cool. The other sort of axes that you mentioned are the things that are either open source or have an origin in open source. The one that's been about probably the most impactful to my own career is Flipper. Can you talk a little bit about the history of that and how you grew that from a very successful, to my mind at least, open source program that I abused the living hell out of into an actual business?
yeah. So I mean, it goes back even to like how did it start, I think, because like how it started was I was working on Words with Friends at the time, like an old, iPhone game. And we were having all kinds of scaling issues because people just played it like crazy. A bunch of celebrities got on it and it just caused problems. And so like we were trying to roll out a new caching system that would be a lot more effective, but then you have a cold cache. And so I kept rolling it out and having to roll it back because the whole site would just go down because you have the cold cache. And so I was talking with my buddy who I was working on, Jesse Newland. He was like, well, what about this thing called rollouts, like feature flags, and we can do like a percentage rollout. I was like, okay. So I threw it in and it worked. And then I was like, okay, feature flags are amazing. Like I just went 1%, 5%, until the cache was warm enough and then let it rip. And I think because of that, I was like, this is awesome. But then on our particular infrastructure at the time, Redis was the smallest bit and rollout was only Redis. And I was like reading these, whatever gangs of four and like all these pattern books and things like that. And they were like adapter pattern. And I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. You should be able to have your feature flags in active record or environment variables or file on disk, JSON, whatever you want to do should be fine. So that's what it started as. Like I was at GitHub at the time. I had moved on from Words of Friends to GitHub. And then again, like I just always hacked on the weekends and I was like, let's just see what happens. And so I started working on it and it came out I really liked the code like a lot. Like it felt right, good, clean, like all those kinds of things. I was like, this is awesome. So I was like, I love this, but I just made it. And I was like, well, what you do when you make something is you just release it as open source so people can enjoy it if they want to. And so I did, and I never used it. Like I never actually had it in an application at all. And, 2 years in, it's, I don't know, back then a lot, like hundreds or thousands of stars and tons of people are using it. And I still have never used it in a single application for myself. Like I just was like, I know the problem. I know what needs to be built and I built it. And like, so that was kind of like the start of it, which I think was kind of cool and different. And it also was like juxtaposed against HTTParty, which got to be super popular and like it kind of drug me down and I hated it. And so then I like gave it away to other people and they maintained it and they did like a fine job. And then eventually they get tired of it. So then it go back to me and there was all this kind of like, and I got burned out because people just expected you to do things. So I was like, Flipper, I'm going to do differently. And so Flipper, I very intentionally was like, I want to make it like more of a community so that it's not just me. And so more people are involved. So every time somebody like shipped a couple good PRs, I asked them if they wanted to be a maintainer. And if they said yes, which I think everybody always did, then I'd add them as a maintainer, put them in the repo, all that kind of stuff, give them access everywhere. And I still like lead it as, I don't know, like a dictator or whatever. Like I still said what got in and what didn't, but other people could help and get involved more quickly. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, seeing other people take ownership over it was actually like awesome. And then I
Yeah.
was at GitHub and I was like done with big companies. I'd been there 5 years, 6 years, I don't know. And I was like, well, what if I like, turn this into a business? I bet somebody would pay for like some of the stuff, the tooling we build in GitHub around the open source project to make it, audits and
Yeah.
stats and like all this kind of stuff. And so I was like, I saw like Sidekick and Mike Perham, and I was like, well, that's, I'll just do that. So I started working on it a little bit, not the ProGem, but like more like a commercially hosted thing. Cause
Yeah.
building, all of those features for every database backed adapter seemed like not fun. I was like,
No.
maybe some things should just be shared in
Yeah.
one space,
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, first problem is like how you don't want to build like HTTP in a request. Like that's too slow. So I'm like, okay, how can I make me disconnected, from their application? So like their application works and it can get sync, and stuff like that. And that's when I started thinking, okay, sync, we import, whatever. So I was like, all right, let's just throw some plans on it and kind of see what happens. And then I ended up Microsoft bought GitHub in the meantime before I had even fully released it. And so then I started on Box Out with those guys because Steve was my partner in Ordered List before GitHub. And so and we live close to each other. So that's kind of like how the origin is basically just like this really organic thing. It was like I was just tired of working at GitHub. And I was like, I need to have a backup. And then like randomly, I remember when I first like decided I was going to build it, I saw Launch Dark League and it announced like 8 million in funding. And I was like,
Yeah.
ding, I'm onto it,
I don't need that
And
much.
of course, yeah. I was like, I could do this with way less than that, And so like I saw, and then like the week after Split announced that they had like, I don't know, 7 million in funding. And I was like, okay, now we're talking like a lot of money. So that's when I started. I was like, okay, I can make this work. I'll do something, And again, like if I had just like released it, I think it would be much bigger now than it is. Like I controlled it too much and like, well, it's not good enough because of this. It's not good enough because the product side of me was like the MVP kept getting bigger. And then eventually I was just like, this is stupid. We've been using this for 2 years on Box Out. We need to just slap a plan on it and let people pay us. And so we did, and people started paying. And so then we were like, well, what if we, change, do things differently, et cetera. And so that's kind of the metamorphosis over time from, per seat pricing to just fixed plans and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think what that story helps illustrate is like the power of feature flags, generally speaking. Like Flipper was very early, an easy way for me to build it into applications. Right. And I mentioned earlier, I abuse the living crap out of it. So, because like this was when I was at Sigster, where we were doing email signature management.
Okay.
Which again it's a pretty dumb idea, but it had lots of interesting clients and interesting data to sort of play around with. And we used Flipper to change like how we worked more than anything else, so that I could hire relatively early career folks and give them sort of a sandbox to play in, where they could just push to production anytime they wanted. We were deploying dozens of times per day. And then they'd all be wrapped behind a feature flag in Flipper that then they could go in and turn back off if it broke something, right? Like something like that. Or we could do user acceptance testing where we could have like a whole page of the application behind a feature flag, be working on that for weeks at a time, and then hand it over to add in customer success or the CEO or the marketing team to go figure out how it all works and that sort of thing. We like built our entire way of working around Flipper to a degree, right? Not even to a degree, actually. I wouldn't have been able to do the things we did without it. In addition to that, the abuse part, and this is why people have to be careful with feature flags. This isn't a problem with Flipper, it's just feature flags generally. It's like we also stored a lot of like licensing information and like things like that in there. Like this customer has access to this thing, and it's like that got painful after a while, but that's not the software's fault.
Yeah, I can see that, but it does like it flags are very close to authorization and entitlements. They're very intertwined. Like when you start out, you can have them be what it can just be that layer, like it can initially, and then, but as it grows, you need a new layer that's like authorization. That like then you use the flag inside of that. That's what we typically do at Box Out and other places. But it can totally be that entitlement bit for a little while because the whole point, and I think what's so powerful about it, and I don't understand how people build without it. Like hearing what you're saying, I totally agree. I do the same thing. I can't function without them. And even as one person on a solo project, I have 5, 10 flags always, turn JavaScripts off, make someone an administrator, like all these random things, you know? And I'm like, I can't fathom. I tried a tagline for a long time that was like, you know, control things at runtime or something like that, because I kept thinking like, what is the reason that everyone who starts to use flags, like you have to pry them out of their cold dead fingers, you know? And it's like, it gives you so much control at runtime.
The thing I'm pointing at is like not even the technical aspect, right? It changes how you think about building software, right? It changes the way you work, right? Like it's not necessarily the technical end of it, because at the end of the day, it's just a quick check, is something on or off, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not disparaging your work. You did fantastic work so that I don't have to think about it, which is great. It's the best software is the one I don't have to think about. Conceptually, it's relatively straightforward, right? But if you really absorb it in, you change how you think about how to build software, right?
Yes.
And you end up adapting everything to like, can we wrap this in a flag so that like, it gets you into, this is a phrase from back when I worked in newspapers, somebody told me one time, right? Is preferred demos over memos, right? Like how can we quickly just get something on a screen that somebody can react to? And if it's behind a feature flag, who cares? Nobody sees it. You didn't break anything. It's fine. Just get it live, get it into production and start getting feedback.
I love demos over memos. I'm writing that down.
Yeah. That is a very old newspaper phrase that I've carried with me for 20 years now. I can't remember who told it to me. It's just one of those things that's just lodged in the back of my head.
I mean, I saw the same thing at GitHub. Like at GitHub, you know, we could deploy from chat and, you know, you'd go to deploy and eventually it got to be there's so many people trying to deploy at once because all our things were turned on and off with environment variables. So you had to deploy to reset. And so it started getting so long, we had to create a deploy train in chat. So you have to say like, queue me to deploy this. And then a chat would ping you and say, you're up. And if you didn't, you know, start deploying in 5 minutes, it would kick you out, go to the next person, and you had to get back on the train because we could only do, you know, one thing at a time. So, and then you had to deploy, you had to wait like 15 minutes to make sure the site wasn't down. And like, so it started getting like really hard to actually get code deployed. And so that's when, you know, I was on paternity leave actually. And then a couple of the guys there were like, we need feature flags. That way we can get the train to be shorter and get people's code in and have the testing, you know, changed from separated and isolated from the deploy, the actual mechanism of getting the code out. And so they were like, let's just use Flipper because John's here. And so they just used it. They did a couple upstream contributions, threw it in. And like I came back from paternity leave and bam, it was there and it was working. And when I left, you know, 18 or 19, they were doing billions of checks a day through Flipper. I mean, it was just like we had, you know, several hundred flags at any given point in time and everybody used it. It, you know, it didn't kill the deploy train, but it dramatically shortened it for like, I mean, good 3-4 years probably. And then, you know, eventually we had thousands of developers and it started becoming a thing again. But yeah, it does. It changes the way you work because if you can change something at runtime instead of at boot, like everything gets easier, less stressful, less scary. Like it's this really cool thing. And I think that's the next stage of Flipper is I'm going to start adding more of those kinds of controls and things to give you safety because I think you need that even more with AI. You know, in my head, I'm like, you know, we need controls at runtime that are not just true false, that are like multivariate. So they should be able to be like strings or integers. Like you should be able to set like, you know, Chris's the default limit is 20, but Chris's is like 30. And it should be the same process as Flipper, you know, like, and so you have all this stuff that's just dynamic at runtime. And then eventually it can go even farther and you can do like GitHub scientist style stuff where you can actually run 2 code paths, return the one, measure both and measure the mismatches and know like if your new code is actually safe and accurate. I think those are the next stages of things I want to build for it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I abused it in a way similar to that, because like you could probably bend it to like get it something similar today. I probably did it.
Well, now there's expressions and they
Yeah.
make it really possible. They're basically like Lisp at runtime. It's like a JSON structure that allows you to make any and or groups. And then it allows you to do, you know, it was working on include, exclude, you know, contains, all that kind of stuff. But like full on programming of like, if this property equals this and this other property is greater than this, and you know, the date is now, or it's a Monday or all that kind of stuff, you can do that now with expressions. And that's, it's basically programming at runtime now. So that's when I was like, well, now all I need is, instead of just being true, false, I just need to return a type. and have
Yeah.
like an early return. So if you're in a certain branch, you should be able to return 2 and have it stop
Yeah.
evaluating the rest, you know? Like there's like
Oh, very
2
cool.
small programming concepts, and all of a sudden you can literally program anything at runtime, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
Which is the interesting thing, like we're circling around sort of AI a little bit. Like anytime I look at like new AI features, it's some bit of AI that just has a tiny bit of programming like baked on top of it or underneath it.
Mm.
Like I
Yeah.
looked up loops and I'm like, oh, you invented cron jobs. Cool.
Yeah.
Every time I look under the hood, it's like, oh, okay, cool. I get what that is. Speaking of open source and sort of AI, your other major project you mentioned earlier is HTTParty, which is one I use constantly also because I think you mentioned this when we talked earlier, is like why it exists in the first place, is I got tired of, I don't like looking up how net HTTP works and having to write that down every time. So I just slap that in the gem file and go on about my merry way. So how is maintaining that going right now? And how is AI impacting how you maintain open source software like that generally?
Yeah, it's going really well. I mean, like, I think a couple of things I mentioned on X recently and some other places is like, one, I'm like, when I get a PR, I tend to get a better PR now from like somebody else, like in the community, because it's like Claude Fable or something like that. Like, you're getting an actual, like, pretty close to ready to ship PR, and like it'll have tests, it'll have like, whereas before it's like, well, I don't have a lot of time. So they just throw the code in there of like, here's what I tweaked and it works, you know, and it's like, use it if you want. So then I got to research, I got to do all this stuff. Now it's like, I get a PR that's like pretty fully shipped. And on top of that, I can triage it really fast because I can just say, I can pop it in Codex or Claude and be like, review this and let me know if anything's missing, you know, and it'll do it. And it'll say, no, it looks solid. And I can merge it. And it passes my eye test, you know, and we have a test suite because I obviously have done that over time. So I think that's the first thing I've noticed is like the quality of submissions are much higher. And then again, I guess I'm lucky in that it's not like insanely popular, you know, it's not like OpenClaw or things like that, that where like they're writing whole things just to like triage the triage, you know, like it's pretty, like I don't even get a PR every week. So it's pretty maintainable from that standpoint. The other thing that's helpful is like Claude gave me, I applied and I got a 20X for free. I was already paying for a 20X. But I applied for HTTParty and Flipper and they were like, sure. So I got free 20X for 6 months and I was like, okay, that's cool. So I was like, well, I can't have that and not actually use it for that.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? HTTParty hasn't gotten a new feature in a long time. Like it prides itself on reliability and on like backwards compatibility and like that kind of stuff. Like all my projects, I typically never go 1.0 because like, and people are always like, how can you not be 1.0? And I'm like, because I never break backwards
It's never
compatibility
done.
anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's never done. And so I can never decide like, I want to put this in here, this line in the sand, you know? So for Flipper, honestly, again, like I only did it for marketing. I was like, if I've never had a 1.0, if I make this 1.0, people will notice. And that was right when we came out with paid plans. So I made it 1.0 just for that.
Yeah. When you ask people to pay for it, you kind of have to say it's done too. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna do the same thing for HTTParty. So like it's gonna go 1.0. It's probably gonna be soon, and I'm gonna have t-shirts. And so like I was like, that's the, and it's not gonna say, you know, 1.0. It's just gonna like when you party, you know, you must party hard, or like gem install HTTParty, or we'll see. Like, you know, what I end up. Chris Oliver recommended a party animal, HTTParty animal, which I think is a good
that's
one.
not bad.
So
I
yeah.
suddenly wonder if like Andrew WK does like Cameo or something.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
don't
have
know.
to
I
check
haven't
on
looked
that.
at it. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Or maybe
That's
maybe somebody who knows him will be listening to this and can put them in touch.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like that'd be pretty cool. Anyway.
That would be very cool. And like, and it's funny because like, I don't even know him, and I've never even listened to like, I don't even know that I've listened to like the song or anything. Like, it just like, but I knew of it, and it's stuck
Yeah.
in my head, and and it was fun, you know. And
Now,
so
now it's
like,
infected
I feel like
every Rubyist in the world. So
that's right. Yeah. But I'm like, and it doesn't. That's another thing with open source too. Like, totally digressing, is just like there's not enough fun. People don't put enough fun in it, and I feel like even like Flipper has an option that's called config.fun equals like true or false. It defaults to true, and if you turn it off, we take away all the fun parts. So we take away like, you know, like the blank slate of the Flipper UI for a long time was Taylor Swift's video, like blank slate. And it's just stuff like that, you know? I'm like, they're fun. And so like, yeah, and I remember at one point somebody was like, can we turn this off? This is like a professional thing. And like, I was like, sure. And I was like, config.fun equals false. I'm like, there, suck it. Like this is not, if you're going to turn it off, you're going to turn off all the fun. Like you're not going to enjoy this at all. But so it's made a big difference, I think, in one, the level of contributions, two, my interest in just maintaining it, because I'm like, you know what, like Flipper how I am because it's commercial. And so I'm like, it's making money. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm going to add new things to it. I've got ideas. It's always been my favorite project, no matter what, anyways. HTTParty, I was like, well, maybe it needs some new features. Like, what if I just, and not that this is the right attitude, and not that I'm actually going to do it, but I was like, what if I just crush every other HTTP library? Like everybody who switched because HTTPX has a better API, or, Faraday allows persistent connections, or something else does streaming better. I was like, what if I just made it so the HTTParty was the most fun and the most features and the most performant? And like, that's a doable thing now. Like it wasn't before. And so I basically had Fable research every other HTTP library to be like, what do they do better than HTTParty? And get their signature thing. I put that into a doc. I ranked it based on what, like whatever it could research to find of like what people are asking for in HTTParty and other libraries. And I went to other languages as well. And I was like, just make me a doc ranked by your, interpretation of importance of what we should start adding to HTTParty. And so like persistent connections are pretty close to done, because that seemed to be the number one thing that came up. There's instrumentation ideas, to hook in active support instrumentation so you can, more easily send that instrumentation somewhere for HTTParty, the calls that are happening. There's some retry stuff. There's a whole bunch of things on a list now that I'm starting to work through. Security, I did the same thing for that. I was like, make a list of all the security issues. It helps for triaging like reports and stuff like that, because most of the time when someone sends me a report, I'm like, bro, I don't even know what language this is. Like, you're using words and bugs and hackery to recreate this that I don't even understand, but Fable does, Soul does. And so I can actually triage and release like CVE updates, which is cool. So it's made a huge difference from all that standpoint of like, A, making it easier to maintain, B, getting better contributions, and C, giving me ideas for what to do next and helping me implement them. So,
yeah. Which again ties into that earlier sort of thing of like, what things does AI let us do that we not couldn't do before, but like wouldn't do before? Like you were going to spend
would take too much time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's too much time. Like it's 2 weeks of time of like searching around the internet and looking at competitors and trying to figure this stuff out. And you can just throw it at that and like it's back really quick. Right. So you end up building like a library. It's like having a research assistant in a lot of ways handy.
Yeah.
And it's also your story, connecting weird topics, reminded me, are you aware of like there's a luxury clothing retailer called Quince, that essentially the way they work is that they look at like what are heritage legacy clothing luxury goods, right? And then it uses AI to go figure out what do people complain about it, what do people like about it, and then they make a version of it that fixes all the stuff that's wrong, except it's like, a quarter of the cost or something.
That's all a business.
Yeah, and again, it's this whole universe of what are things that weren't in reach before that are now?
Yeah.
And then it's, to your point, what it increases, I think, are, like you mentioned with Flipper, like safety, right? Like how can you make sure what we're doing is safe? And the other thing is it brings back in like taste and judgment, right? Like you mentioned product hat before, right? That becomes more important as a developer or an engineer, because you have to be able to figure out which of these things actually matter and are actually important and which things are like good to do, right? You still have to say no sometimes, even though AI makes it very easy to say yes in a lot of cases.
I actually think even going farther, like everyone who has taste, those are the people that I'm seeing explode with AI the most. Like it's almost like, if you have the taste, then it amplifies you, and it amplifies you by a different multiplier. And if you don't, then it's the same thing. Like you'll create more of the stuff that doesn't have taste or something. But like, I feel like the people that I've seen that really have excelled with it so far are the people who excelled without it, and who had like a taste and who had ideas, but they just were constrained on time and brainstorming and research and all these other things unrelated to the actual ability of creating products. It's been really cool to see.
Yeah, and it's also like fits in that general theme of like an accelerant, right? In a lot of ways. And it'll accelerate both the good and it'll also accelerate the bad. So for a lot for my business outside of, appearing on podcasts, um, is when you insert AI into like a dysfunctional engineering org, it like explodes the thing, right?
Oh, I
It's
bet.
like, yeah, it makes an absolute mess. It enhances and accelerates both function, like the good stuff, and the dysfunction. Whatever's broken, if it starts going at breakneck speed, it's going to explode all over the place, and you're going to see all the parts that were broken to begin with, that you were just slow enough that nobody ever noticed or it didn't hurt all that bad. Suddenly it starts hurting a lot. Which, hey, I'm available for hire. Anyway, John, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. One note we didn't get to. Both of us are dads. We have kids that are also growing up in an AI age. I think mine are a little bit older than yours. But you had shared a really interesting story about how you're working with your kid to kind of learn how to follow in your footsteps, maybe a little bit, tiny bit, and just how to navigate this world of AI being everywhere. And I wonder if you could share that with us.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think where it started is I saw somebody who was like, you know, there's a couple different approaches for AI. Like one is like, keep your kids from it, protect them, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. The other one is like, teach them how to use it and how to understand it. And I'm like, I just feel like that's your job as a parent, no matter what, is like, here's the world, here's what's in the world, here's a lens to like look through and how to think about it when it's beneficial, when it's not, how to find that line for yourself, all those kinds of things. So it started with us, it started as like color pictures to color. So that was the very beginning. So it was like creating AI pictures to color. So my kids never really colored in coloring books. Like they just, but like once in a while they would do it, but they'd get bored really fast on it. And then one day I was like, well, let's make something with like, it was when Bing got like GPT, whatever, or, there was like you could use the image gen from ChatGPT in Bing for free for like, within certain limits. So I was like, let's just make some stuff there. So we made like a bunch of fruits, like riding vehicles and with mohawks. And so it was like a banana on a motorcycle with a mohawk and a strawberry on a motorcycle with a mohawk and just like that kind of stuff. And he just colored pictures forever. This was years ago. And I was like, okay, I'm like, that's interesting. And same with my daughter. Like she's getting, like they started to hear me make the prompt or see me make the prompt. And then they're learning how to recreate the prompt. So then they're wanting me to just let them make the prompt, So they're starting to learn this prompting and stuff. So then I was like, well, I bet AI could make a bedtime story. That's another thing we always do. So we started doing AI bedtime stories and like completely unique stories. And we would do long threads of like, hamsters in the evil dark space and all this kind of stuff. And then from there, it was like maybe a year ago. So he's like 11 now. Maybe a year ago, we started getting more complex, more like he wanted to prompt more. He wanted to do more of that. And then, maybe probably 6 months ago, he said something about like, oh, he wanted a Nintendo account, I think. And I was like, nah, I don't want to figure out parental controls and all that. Like, just play offline. It's fine. I played offline my whole life, uphill both ways in the snow.
Yeah, yeah. You want to play online, you had to go to someone's house.
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
a LAN party.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what if we just recreated it and we made it so you could play with your friends that way? And he was like, well, we can do that. And I was like, I don't know. Let's find out. I went to Claude and was like, like, I want to make a game, blah, blah, blah. And like, he's just watching. And then I was like, all right, do you have ideas? And he's like, well, yeah, I got some ideas. I'm like, here, I use Whisper Flow. I hit the button. He starts talking and we generate this version that was like playable. And I was like, well, can we make it 3D? So then we made it 3D. And then, we had chickens versus zombies. And then we were like, and the chickens, shoot eggs out their butts to kill the zombies or whatever. And it was kind of Minecraft-like, and it was cool. And he's like, okay, well, now I want to recreate Minecraft, and I want to be able to play in my friend's world, and they play in our world, and we can portal to each other, and we can chat back and forth. And I was like, okay, I'm like, I've never made a game in my life, never done 3D programming. And we made it, and it was actually like I dropped it in this like dev chat that I have, and like all of us, like 3 or 4 of my friends are playing this game that we made that's like Minecraft, and like we're all like, oh my gosh, do this, do this. And it reminded me of Minecraft back in the day where you had like Campfire open and then you had Minecraft open and you'd be chatting with your buddies and you're on the same shared server. And I was like, there's just something cool about multiplayer like that. And I was like, well, how do we make multiplayer, without me having to set up all these servers and whatever? And they're like, we'll just use Cloudflare and durable objects. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is actually the most cool use of durable objects ever. So every world is a durable object and everybody connects to that world. And then you can create portals and jump between the worlds. They're named and you have chat inside of the worlds. And so like, we go camping in the summers. We were gone, almost 2 months this summer, all the way out to Washington and back. And he and his friend could occasionally get together and play. And like they would, if they weren't timed up, like if we were in Pacific and he's in Eastern, they would like leave chat messages for each other. And so then they could like converse back and forth and they're not constantly using our phones to do so and stuff like that. And it's just really cool. And it was like now he's learning, he used to always say like he wanted to be an inventor. That was like what he would put on his first day of school thing. And now the last like 6 months, he's like, I'm gonna be a programmer.
That's very cool.
And it's just, it's cool. Like, so, he's able to build what's in his imagination. He's learned that in like small steps. He's learned like, ask me questions or prove it to me that it works, or all the things that I would do when I build software, And I remember even talking with my wife and she's like, well, he's not learning. Is he learning to program or is he not? And I'm like, he is. Like, this is what programming is going to be. Programming, it's software development. It's just totally different now. Like, you don't have to actually understand the code. You just have to have, taste and know how to get the LLM to, build what you want with the right taste as well. Like the right, technical requirements so that it functions for what you need to, and also, the product taste or the game taste that you want to apply. So we've built a ton now. So we built Chickens for Zombies, Blockcraft Realms, which is the chat durable objects and all that. We built Kitten Catcher. So you go around this like 2D island and you shoot yarn balls at cats to catch them, and you have to collect all the species. And that's how you, that's how you win the game. Yeah, exactly. There's no ads or anything. We're not doing anything commercial.
It's legally distinct. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think generally that's sort of, because like I work a lot, my kids are a little bit older. They're both in high school at this point. And so it's trying to teach them to be curious about it, right? Like we're in this stage where like we don't know necessarily where this is going, right? We both have theories. Everybody has theories, right? But we don't know. And ultimately, you and I are old enough that we're not going to be the ones directing where this goes, right? We need our kids to be able to figure this out, right? And so right now we're in this explosion age where like these tools are available and they're subsidized or free, and you can like just play around with them and experiment, see what you can do, see how they work. What my job has been to explain what they are, how they work, what they can do. And then my kids can figure out what they want to do with it past there. So.
Yeah. Again, it's like we talked about from the beginning, it's an amplifier for creativity and taste. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you're 11 or if you're 44 or 45 or whatever I am. Like it can amplify and you can do things you couldn't do before. Even like the little ESP32, like it looks like an iPhone, Apple Watch. I never would have hacked on one of those before. Or like, a Raspberry Pi. I bought an Arduino and I was like, this is too hard. Yeah. Like it's still downstairs in my bar, just sitting there.
I've got one sitting in a box somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I turned a light on based on a tweet and I was like, okay, I'm done with this. This was way too much work to do this. I don't have the patience. But now with AI, I do have the patience because, and like that, the hard part is the ideas and like the taste and the experience of all of that. The easy part is the building now. So,
yeah. Well, the dirty secret is the building has always been the easy part. The hard part has always been the thinking of what is the right thing to do and what it should actually do and what the taste has been, right? The actual syntax code part, especially in Ruby, because I love Ruby, has never been the hard part because you just write what you think it's going to be and usually it's right, which is also great. All right, John, thanks again for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Where can folks follow you online these days and kind of keep up with all your adventures?
I am Jay Nunemaker pretty much everywhere. So I use BoxOut itself to post to X, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, whatever you want to consume it in. And then we also have Standing in the Fire, a podcast as well. So you can check that out if you want.
Yeah, very cool. And obviously the open source, the two major ones are Flipper and HTTParty. I think there's probably a couple others, but you can find them on GitHub and find all that stuff. Highly recommended if you're into Ruby. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too.
That was John Nunemaker, who runs Boxout Sports, Fireside, Flipper, and maintains a stack of open source most Rubyists have shipped without ever knowing it was there. 3 things stuck with me. John gave up trying to focus on one thing and gets more done with a portfolio, because when you jam on one project, you switch to another instead of dropping to 0. Feature flags aren't a technical trick so much as a change in how you think. When you can flip behavior at runtime instead of at deploy, everything gets less scary, and you start reaching for demos over memos. And AI is an amplifier, not a shortcut. It accelerates good teams and good taste, and it accelerates the mess and broken ones, and it pays off most for the people who have already done it before. If this was useful, follow the hallway track wherever you're listening so the next one shows up. I also write a weekly newsletter called Expedite over at getaxiomatic.com. It's more of this kind of thinking on a regular cadence. And if you write Ruby, go look up Flipper and HTTParty, or go find them in your gem file already. John's the reason a lot of us stopped worrying about problems we used to have to solve ourselves. Thanks, John. See you next time.